Hey, Philology and Tears, those of us like our spirituality with a twist. We're, we're smiling when we shouldn't be, because we're about to go in to talk about some of the most difficult shit in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about love. That's difficult shit too. But
Yeah.
now we're going to talk about something else. Unfortunately, we're going to talk about war and violence. And I think this really is coming from a place of passion for Daniel.
Yeah.
As we were talking off mic, it was the idea of there's really nothing else. You were saying, Daniel, there's really nothing else that you could be honestly talking about now because it's so important. And so many people have been really coming to you to discuss this and coming to you in the course of your medical practice and what you're doing, like just to talk about this
Yeah.
and try to get some perspectives on it. So we wanted to try to do the best we can with this, a little bit free for me. We'll do the best we can to kind of be here for y'all,
Mm-hmm.
fellow G&Ters. We'll do the best we can, like to kind of discuss these things. And I'm really anxious to hand this baton off to Daniel. So I'm going to hand it off.
Yeah.
Yep. There it
Well,
goes. I
Eric,
just passed it on. Yeah.
yeah. So first to our audience, thank you for listening. We appreciate all the feedback and the love that everybody gives us. And, we've done a lot of stuff on love this year, a lot of stuff on various psychologists and psychologies and things like this. So we're really kind of like, we're still in the same vein of psychological viewpoints in the world, actually. And talking about how society, how what we think, what we view, what we do might be outside of society's norm. And this to me is actually in the same vein. It's an extension of that. And I think because we have been talking about that for so long, it's sitting more at the forefront of my mind. And as we're talking and as we're recording, I am thinking about my friends, my patients, and some of those people who are listeners to this. And so this episode, this, little soliloquy or dialogue when you come in is for these people. It's for the people who look around the world and wonder, where is the compassion? It's for the people who are sitting at home saying, this is fucked up. Like, not just one side is fucked up. All of it is fucked up. And I think that viewpoint, unfortunately, is not as prevalent as I would prefer, as I would like, as would sit well with me. I always expect that there is polarization amongst every single topic, and partly because of how people were raised, cultural influences, karma, whatever, life experience. And I'm not necessarily poo-pooing that. One of my main flaws is that I'm a Chicago Bears fan. And as we all know, they're terrible. So every week it's a little death, a little mini death, and I wonder how many more times they could lose before I just totally give up on them. Probably never, because it's a character flaw.
Yeah.
But
the quarterback for the Bears just broke his hand over the weekend. So yeah.
No problem. What else is
no. Yeah.
But so as we're and for those who don't know, we're talking about the kind of referencing the conflict in the Middle East currently. And so I'm just kind of like watching the coverage, looking at people's reactions on social media, hearing conversations, and I'm taking all of that in, as many of my patients, I can't say all of them, but I'm going to say 80% or more, when they come into the clinic, they want to talk about this particular subject with me. And they don't want to talk about this that much with the other practitioners that I know, because I have asked. And I just began over the
that's a sign of trust. I mean, people are sharing with you, not that they don't trust the other people who are in the practice, but when people bring these things up, it's because there's a certain trust there.
Yeah. And I was talking with
at least around this issue, and they want to share it.
Yeah. And I was talking with a friend of mine last night who's also a regular listener. And I was asking her, why does she think, knowing her who knows me, why would she think that people would do that? And she said, I believe that people trust, like Eric, to your point, but that they're looking for a different perspective, maybe even.
Yeah, that's what you said when you wanted to talk about this. You're like,
yeah,
you should get out there and, at least for the people who are listening to us, try to offer something a little bit different than maybe what's
a
being
little bit
talked
different.
About.
She used the words benevolent perspective, and I told her, oh, there's no pressure in that at all. That's we got that. Well,
I had like a couple of things with it. On the one hand, I've been in Paris
Ooh la
for the
la.
week. So yeah, sacre bleu. So it was a funny thing in that funny, I don't know. It was an unusual thing in the sense that I was there, these events were going on, but I was very removed from it. So when you kind of brought this up that you wanted to talk about it today, I almost had to start. I mean, I had the general sense, but I had to start trying to inform myself
Hmm.
more, you know? I
Hmm.
talked with my brother and I said, Daniel wants to talk about this. He thinks it's really important. And my brother's reaction was, don't do that. Mine, stay away from that. No. And I was like, no, I've already agreed to do it. And he was like, no, back out. Don't do it.
Call it
I was like,
sick. Call it sick.
that's it. No. And I was like, it's okay. I gotta do this. And that, obviously the way that we want to talk about things that are important, and you're
Yeah.
expressing that this is a thing that's important to talk about from the reaction that you're having with people. So that was part of it. But what did strike me is someone who's been away from this, hasn't been seeing it, and all of a sudden, I mean, I knew it was going on, but I haven't been
Yeah. Yeah.
really paying attention. All of a sudden, trying to immerse myself in it.
Hmm.
One of the, and we were talking about this a little bit off mic as we were kind of thinking, how do we want to do this? But like how polarized,
Yeah.
instantaneously polarizing it
Yeah.
is in very like obscure ways. So I've kind of taken a variety of media sources. I'm more of a lefty person, shocker. But
No one's perfect.
mm, but I take in like different sources, but the ones that were more pro one side, absolutely pro one side.
Yeah.
The ones that were more pro the other side, absolutely the pro the other side. And I thought this is such an odd, terrible, horrific, awful situation to try to take like a one-sided thing on. I can't
Right.
see it, you know? And no matter how I run the mental calculus in my head, and we don't want to go through and rehash all the atrocities
People can turn
that
on
have
the
been
news and get all
happening.
that
Yeah.
coverage for themselves. That's not the point of this
But
discussion.
in looking at it, I'm like, well, I don't know how in an event like this you could polarize into a corner. I can't see it. So, anyways, that's one of the things that certainly wanted to bring up. And I mean, you expressed the same
Hmm.
impression. I got like a blast of it because I wasn't paying any attention to it.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, okay, here I am. I'm back in Chicago, you know, just within the past like day and a half or something. And so we were going to talk about this. And I was looking, I was like, oh my God, this is so,
Hmm.
all the coverage is so absolutely polarized
Hmm.
in a predictable way. I mean, I know the sources that are more, that I listen to are more pro one side than the other side or whatever. But it was like, it was, and I thought, oh God, in this situation with just so much horrificness going on all over the place, I don't know.
Hmm.
So I know, what do you think about that? I mean,
Well,
obviously we're
yeah. So
talking about, what do you
that's,
think about that? I mean, that's obviously a major part of this, but
yeah. I mean, that's
ugh.
want to have this discussion. So, so people have been asking, not what to do, but some people have asked what to do, but less people what to do. More people just wanted to kind of like vent and share their
What kind of
angst,
things have people been
anguish.
saying about it? I mean, I don't want to, if it's too
Well,
close to the bone, we don't have to talk about it, but
I think they're hurt.
because
You
it's just
know,
it's such a painful set of events. It's just painful
yes.
inside. Okay.
And this is from people who scan the gamut of religions. It's
Mhm.
not, and it's Christians, it's Catholics, it's Protestants, it's Jewish, it's Muslim, like it goes over all of it. Now, granted, my patient population, I'd say, is probably close to a 90% college graduate rate.
Mhm. Mhm.
Rate of the college graduation rate is 90%. So I'm dealing with educated people, middle to upper middle class, just to give this the swath. So I'm not under any kind of pretense about who the people that I'm working with in this lifetime at this particular time, but they do span the religions, many of whom you know are directly related to the conflict, not personally, but via their faith or family members or something like this. They're tired. They're tired. They're tired of
I
seeing
mean, I know
death.
how it is for you too. I mean, like I know people. I mean, I know people who are directly involved in this. I know
Mm-hmm.
people who are immediately going to be affected by this. I do
Mm-hmm.
have that experience. I'm sure you do too.
Mm-hmm.
People
Mm-hmm.
who are directly involved both sidesiness of this that are going to be
Yeah.
impacted by this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Everybody's tired of it. You're tired of
Yeah, yeah,
what? You're
yeah, yeah,
tired
yeah.
of it. You're tired of it all. And so for me as a person who is not unattached, but I identify as an American citizen, for better or worse, as a yogi.
Mm.
I'm a yogin. That's it. That's who, that's the one thing that's come out for me. That's who I am. And so I want to be, a free yogi, to be able to see things and go, oh wow, that's unique. Let me try and see what that does to me on the inside. When I look at something, does it elicit a response? Yes, I'm a human being. So when I see children murdered, I have a response. I have the same response if that child is brown or green, or it doesn't matter. Like it elicits the same response, and it's not a means to make the situation seem, oh, it's happening everywhere. Well, actually, it is happening in many places in the world. We're focused on one right now, but this is happening in many places in the world, which to me is almost mind-boggling, because so many of us have a really good life, over here in the United States. I know we have some international listeners, and I hope everybody who's listening has a good life of some, in some way, shape, or form. But how is it that we don't remember that? And then when things come up, we're reminded momentarily of how good we have it, because we don't have to worry about living in a war zone. But then immediately we go and we point sides, we point fingers at the one side or the other side, not knowing the depth of the cost of war, which, from somebody who was in the military and who has seen the devastation on the ground with their hands, with their eyes, of a war-torn country, the devastation that is done to not just the people who are alive, but to the family members of those who are dead, and to the psychology of everybody who is there. It's a virus. It changes the mood of things for years. It doesn't just go away. It's not just like a bad day. Talk to people who are victims or in some of these mass shootings that have happened in this country over the dozens of mass shootings that have happened. This is it's a terror on the mind of all those who see it and who are connected to it. And so it's just like mind-boggling to me that people would never lift a finger in anger ever, because they don't have it within them to do it, can lift their fingers to type some shit online to say extremely disparaging things when they would never do that in person. And I know keyboard warriors have been around for a very long time, but these aren't like some weird people sitting in their basement, saying like, my character in Dungeons and Dragons would kill you. Like, this is not that. These are mothers and fathers and
Well,
regular folk.
how serious has that conversation been? And what do you think that means to people, I guess, since you got to that point?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
because I haven't been having them. I haven't been paying much attention to them. So I don't know if I got a really good feeling about what's happening with this.
So I have two thoughts on this part. One thought is the polarized. So let me take the polarized view first. And because the situation is so complex, and some people who are listening to this, maybe you might have a different view. You might say, no, it's not complex. It's very simple. Well, that's your opinion. I believe it is complex. Any geopolitical intervention is complicated because there is more than meets the eye, right?
I don't know if I can. I don't know if you can look at something like this. How do you even say this? And in any way, say it's not complex. I don't know in what world you could say this is not
Somebody could
complex.
say
I don't
this is
even.
they could say it's religious based, and that's that's the crux of it all at the end of it,
Oh, I see what you mean.
right?
Be reductionistic in how you interpret what it means or
Yes,
something. We
yes,
were talking off mic, and we agreed we're not going to do this, but there's just this convoluted history,
yeah,
and it's just so, and as I was thinking we were going to talking about this, I was like had to commute for my work, so I was just listening to like some things on the whole history again, just reminding
yeah,
myself, or
yeah.
events that I just even forgot. I was like, oh my God, I forgot all about
Mm-hmm.
that particular thing happening or that particular thing happening. I was like, this is
Mm-hmm.
just so ridiculously convoluted.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many ways, like, and I don't want to tangent off. Maybe we'll double back to it. But, the idea that it's all so convolutedly geopolitical.
Yeah.
All these different actors have their own sort of agendas going on if you really
Mm-hmm.
want to try to understand it. And I
Mm-hmm.
suppose from the spiritual point of view, you try to understand the world.
Yes.
right? That's part of like understanding conventional truth, as we sometimes talk about
That's
here.
why that's Eric, that's why we're
Yeah.
doing this, because that's,
So
as spiritual minded people, we're doing it. We're going to go into the thing. The way out is through.
yeah, so we didn't want to sit here and talk about whatever our opinions are about the history and the this and the that,
No.
or that event or this event. But I don't know how, if you're going to be a person who's seeking truth, that's a yogi,
Mm-hmm.
right? A spiritual person speaking truth. I don't know how you could look at this and not say this is the most convoluted fucking shit in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
This is so convoluted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in a certain sense, the tragedy of that is also it's so convoluted, and the people who are really suffering are kind of caught in the middle of all these convolutions, you know. And it's like breaks my heart. I'm getting sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It breaks my heart to see that there's all these people who are in the midst of all of like
Yeah.
this convoluted stuff outside of their control,
Mm-hmm. They're living
outside of
their,
their ability to do anything about it. I'm sure outside of their desire to participate in it. They don't want to be part of this. I wouldn't want to be part of this if I were them. And I think we can have normal human empathy to say that probably the vast majority of people don't want to have anything to do with any of this. The
no.
people who are in the middle of the throes of this, you know. So I didn't want to like, you know, so we kind of doing it free form. I don't want to get away from what you're talking about, but I mean, I guess it's the thing of like that too, you know, the convolutedness and the people who are stuck in it. And I think anyone who would try to say that it isn't convoluted is, I think, on some level, it has to be being spiritually disingenuous. I just don't see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm willing to say that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to an audience. If you think this is somehow particularly obviously black and white, is one of the most obviously black and white things in the world, I just don't see how you could say that.
Yeah. No.
I just don't see it.
And for me, that
To be intellectually and spiritually honest. Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No. And then, but that's fine, because the reaction, the emotionally driven reaction is black and white for many, 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 many people. And to me, that is exactly the opposite of spiritual practice. That is the opposite, in my mind, of true religious practice. The goal of it is to overcome disillusion, to overcome the separation, right? To move beyond dualistic viewpoints and find the singular one, the one of the middle one. And when people do that, it not only is it from an emotional place, and people can have their reactions. I'm not saying to be an automaton, a robot. I've said that numerous times on our, you know, within our work here. But it is to say that, like, if you are simply drawn to or averted from anything of significance in life, you are a ping pong ball. No offense. I guess that's not really offensive. Okay, let me be more offensive. You're a fucking ping pong ball.
Well, that's
You know,
that's yeah.
right?
It does have more edge to it when you put it
There,
that way.
that and I mean it. Like, I know that's not really angry. It's not really mean. You know, it's calling somebody a ping pong ball. You know, but whatever. But what I mean to say is that, like, you're going to bounce around in life as if someone else has paddles, and they are just able to hit your emotions back and forth because you move at the whim of the wind.
So I guess part of the idea here is that this is being aware of your own internal emotional states and how they affect you and how they can kind of be pulled in extreme ways by external events.
Correct.
That if you really took a step back and looked at it, it would be like, well, this isn't really accurate to what the situation is.
Correct.
So maybe that, and then also the idea that some of the world is trying to understand, you know, using the Buddhist lingo for this, conventional truth. Take a step back and really see if you can figure out what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in a realistic way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is trying to develop a kind of a clarity of vision,
Yes.
right? And in the absence of doing that, it's very hard to have equal compassion.
Yeah.
Right? It's very hard to do that because otherwise you will be pulled into a one-sidism
Mm-hmm.
that is probably, if you took a step and really looked at it, diluted.
It is diluted.
It is
And
diluted.
so witnessing the polarization then, and like I said this earlier before we were recording, is a deep I'm not going to say a reminder because I don't want to be reminded of something that is disappointing, but I'm going to say maybe a deep observation for me on the immense amount of disconnectedness that people have between, we'll say first, within themselves and their emotions or their thoughts, and then between themselves and the external world, and then obviously at the end of it, between them and other people. Because you can be very quick to make some other person who shares literally 99.6% of your DNA exactly the same. And you can find within them some beliefs that would make them go from a human being to a target, one that you can depersonalize and then feel justified in having the desire or the action to eliminate their life, which I don't think anybody has the right to. I just don't.
I was trying to think about this when we knew we were going to talk about it, and I was running around doing the things I had to do on this day. At these Mondays and Tuesdays when we're recording this, these are busy days for me. We're doing this on Tuesday night. But I was trying to think, okay, so since a lot of my core space I come from is kind of Buddhist, I thought, well, what is the Buddhist space of this? And I was like, well, I think in part there's this idea that you're going to own your actions in a very particular way in Buddhist thought, that you want to demonstrate kindness because in a certain sense it creates kindness karmically back to you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So even, like the Dalai Lama will say something like, when you start acting nice to people, the first person who's going to benefit is you.
Is you, right?
That's the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's partially because it'll feel better to come at things from a kind space.
Mm-hmm.
It feels subjectively better. And we know that from our Chinese medical point of view too, right? That to come from kinder spaces is psychologically and physically healthier, right? So in Chinese medical thought, to come from a place of benevolence is going to be better for like the systems that have to do with the wood phase or wood element energies and the liver. That's a better space to come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
To come from a space of compassion is going to be better for the digestive system. They have the whole theory around this,
Mm-hmm.
right? In Asian culture. And so that is better, right? But then there's also this understanding that like if you commit if you commit acts of kindness, you're more likely to generate those acts of kindness back. And that's a narcissistic, that's a strategic point of view.
Right.
Right?
Slightly selfish, but it's okay.
It's a wise selfishness. I think Bob Thurman uses that line too, Bobby T, right? If you're going to be selfish, you might as well be wisely selfish. I think that the Dalai Lama says that.
There you go.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that line, right? So I was thinking, okay, at least Buddhism has that idea in it, right? That's not to say that, if we did the whole historical sweep of Buddhist countries, that they've been awesome
right
all the time. They have not. I'm not deluded on that point. I'm also, and we talked about this pretty honestly, I'm not in the thing where I said like Tibetan culture is like perfect or something, even though I think Tibetan culture has many wonderful things about it. It's not perfect across the board for sure.
No.
And Genghis Khan was a Buddhist. So, there's like, you can get atrocities committed by Buddhist nations. I don't want to be falsely idealistic about it, but there is maybe something about that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think about that. Oh, this is terrible stuff to talk about, but you did mention off mic, some of this has to do with like religious thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which we don't want to criticize anybody's religion.
No.
But, and there's something like to take a step back and say, to what extent is the way I'm thinking about my religion contributing to these kinds of things, right?
So what I've been, in terms,
I don't know.
In that, what I've been saying is that, like, for me, the way that I view it is that the institution of religion and spiritual practice are completely separate things. There are maybe some areas of overlap, maybe it's some monastery, at least that's in my mind. This is the last bastion of goodness, is it in a monastery, right? Whatever.
Probably not, but
probably
okay.
not, but like, to me, those two things are separate. So when someone says religion, you might as well say government, right? And when someone says spiritual practice, you can call them like community activists, people who are organizing and doing food drives and things like this, feeding the homeless. The government doesn't, they may do that, but that's going to look completely different than people in your neighborhood getting together to help the woman down the street who lost her job and his husband passed away a couple of years ago. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different, that's going to look totally different.
Well, I've been around these Tibetan people at times, right? Retreats and people, and and things like that. And it's always been very impressive to me in being around Tibetans. They certainly don't voice the bitterness and anger that you could. You know what I mean? Whatever they feel inside, they feel inside.
Right.
And maybe in their more private moments, different things are said, I don't know. But it is an impressive thing. I was thinking about this related to this, Buddhist thing too during the day. It is an impressive thing that, there was a Tibetan culture and it's gone. Like, it's obliterated. It's never, you have to say it's never coming back to Tibet again. It's over, right? That country's occupied. And whatever was this thing that was built up for a millennia and over, right? 1,500 years, 1,600 years, this whole cultural edifice that was built up, it's gone. And I tried to think of like, well, how bitter and angry would I be if, the entire culture I was participating in, especially if I was fond of it, if I felt like
right,
maybe a deserved pride, because there's lots of elements of like this Tibetan Buddhist culture that were, important things were preserved in this space. And there were people who did their spiritual practice and had their ideas and wrote their books and did all this stuff, and it's gone. How angry would you be, right? And the interesting thing has been, like older Tibetans, people who, probably fled into India and things, and they certainly don't demonstrate it outwardly, And I thought, well, so what's doing that, to help with some of that bitterness? And I think like what you're saying in this episode, one of the points you wanted to make is it has something to do with spiritual practice, obviously.
Yeah. Yep.
To help you deal with when these terrible things happen, which sometimes might be personal, or in this case is transpersonal. It's, in some ways for the people that you're talking about that you're seeing as patients, they're not being immediately affected by this exactly, right? But it's horrific enough that it's seeping into who they are.
Yeah.
And I guess the idea is like spiritual practice is supposed to do this, right?
Yeah.
And a different orientation towards the world. Robert Thurman does make this point about the Dalai Lama too, to give him his props. Dalai Lama, Thurman too, but Dalai Lama especially, that at least publicly, whatever, I think privately too for him, he's trying to talk about this non-retaliation, right? He's trying to talk about that, which you can have retaliation, non-retaliation, and something like this on all sides. So we're not even talking about any particular side within this conflict. And that's a powerful thing for somebody to try to do, especially in the context of how amazingly intense this rhetoric got so quickly, right? And I guess if we're talking about Tibetans, those are people who are like we were talking about existential threats within this situation. There's existential threats on all sides in this situation, right? And there's an existential threat for the Tibetans too, right? And all I can say on the personal level, being around Tibetan people, I've been like, this is very impressive. Mostly people who present a very positive sense of themselves in the world, right? And don't seem to be carrying this bitterness. And their country's gone, right? It's never coming back, right? And so that's something impressive about that. Does that make sense what I'm saying, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess all you can really trace it is a certain kind of spiritual practice and then maybe a certain kind of philosophy, which I guess I'm trying to get to what the Dalai Lama is trying to put out there, which is this idea of, okay, we can't react back violently, even though we want to, right? We can't do it. And certainly the emotions are there. And I'm not going to say that there aren't Tibetans who are, freedom fighters in this way or who want to resist. And I'm not saying that isn't happening, and we can respect that even if that is happening. But there's a position from this person in authority and power who's trying to be this compassionate figure, trying to say, no, we can't do this.
Right.
And then I guess that's when the rubber hits the road for these things, right? In spiritual practice, when you really can say, okay, this is not easy at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted to do this today. That's
I mean, I
for
suppose after, I know how you felt after 9/11, there was that reaction, you know, for a lot of us where you're like, I, I don't know. It wasn't America that I felt this about, but the loss of something that was kind of beautiful. You know what I mean?
so that was going to be
And
the
I don't know
next.
what that feels like for people in the Middle Eastern context or the Tibetan context, but the
Yeah.
loss of things, it's hard not to feel angry about that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you,
No, no,
but
no, you're good. I mean, I think
yeah,
so, like as we always like to wrap things into our, practice in the language. So the first part, watching people's reaction was to me a loss of people's sense of interconnectivity or connectivity between human beings, you
you're
know?
talking about like a kind of a basic feeling of interconnectivity and empathy between human beings.
Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah,
just cut it. We'll just cut that, get that out of here. Now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
easier for me to not feel the other person's suffering. I'm not killing a grandmother, or I'm not killing a niece or a daughter. That's them. They're one
Mm-hmm,
of them.
mm-hmm.
And now they're garbage. They're barely human anyways. You know what I'm saying? Like it's it's easier to do. And what you're talking about now is like this, and what I wanted to get to, which is I'm glad we're here, is for us who are not directly involved, you know, and I mean directly, like yourself. If you're not there, you're listening to this and you're not there, and you feel like rough about it, which I imagine many people do. Remember that September 10th, 2001 was a normal day.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the next day there was kind of an innocence lost. And even though we've been in this conflict before, 2018 was the last time that they were, maybe even after 2021, I don't know. They go in there kind of regularly. There's some beef, we could say, they got. That this time there's more eyeballs on this now than there ever have been before. It appears to me that this is like a worldwide awareness at the moment. And
You're talking about
that
like all the violence that's happened around this in various ways over,
yeah,
this one is attracting a kind of an attention that otherwise wouldn't be
yeah,
attracted.
absolutely. And for me, like it's one of these things that like last Wednesday was a regular day. And then Thursday happened and it's no longer the same. And now we're like diving headfirst into like atrocities that you're going to watch on your television while you're doing whatever it is that
I
you
have
were
to be
doing.
completely honest. Like, I'm not, just as far as the spirituality of this goes, I think I don't want to kill your flow, but I'm not doing
Yeah.
that.
No, no,
I'm not
I'm
going
not
to do
saying
that.
you're not.
So I would say as a recommendation, like,
I
don't
would
do
not
that.
recommend it.
No, just don't do it.
I wouldn't recommend it. But it
No.
is to say that like it doesn't, that's time. That's my point, is that the reference of impermanence, like this thing is always changing and we don't know which ways it's going to change, and when it does happen it doesn't go back. It only continues to go forward, and things are
Mm.
only going to change. And so as we're living
You're
our
kind of getting a
lives,
little zen about this.
uh-huh, and so as we're
Yeah.
as we're
Okay.
living our lives and we're doing our thing, this has to be kept in mind. This has to be kept in mind. It's not just your own health that you have to be concerned with. People who have, I'm not rich people, but someone who's saved money in their life, they have maybe a little retirement savings or something like that. Like, if you go, that money don't mean shit to you no more. There
That's
is
like,
not,
yeah,
there is not the
preciousness of
richest
human
person in the,
life, but like the inevitability of the life isn't going to last forever. And the
yeah,
possessions are not things that you're going to take with you into your next life if you want to be all Buddhist about it or
right.
something,
But
right?
then there's stuff like this that
Mm-hmm.
changes the complexity and the tenor of the situation that we're living in. So yes, your life is not going to last forever, but the conditions that you're in aren't going to last forever either. And so as we're doing whatever it is that we're doing, to keep in mind, it really is a borrowed time. It's a borrowed experience. And so, we're always sort of making these calls for people to like live your life as fully as possible. I always tell people, buy whatever you want, whenever the fuck you want it. Who knows? Just go get it. It doesn't, whatever. If you have it, you can do it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But I mean, it is to say that like what you choose to spend your time on will not be returned to you, So to choose wisely. So if you're going to go and have a discussion about this with people, because you want to air out your grievances or work through some difficult, sticky parts that are weighing on your heart, like choose wisely how you spend and who you spend that time with. Because if it's just kvetching over whatever, those are not moments you're going to get back. And I don't think that those things are adding to your life in particular. And they're definitely not adding to the solution of this particular conflict. If anything, the angst and anger only allow the people who are already anxious and angry to become more anxious and angrier, because they feel like their opinion is justified because there are others who believe in that way. And the people who have actually outside opinions are, I hope, a growing minority, but that by having meaningful discussion, leading with vulnerability, open-heartedness, and compassion, you can touch the parts of people that they don't want to be touched because they're full and fueled with anger, disappointment, rage, and sadness. You know what I'm saying? And so if you don't add to that kind of equation, and you can come at it from a different perspective and say, where can we agree first? Let's agree first. Let's agree murder is bad. Can we start there? If we can start there, then we can talk about anything, because we can always come back to what that our agreement is. And then in this way, you're rebuilding the bonds together. I just feel like people, at least right now, are focused on the divisions, not necessarily focused on putting things together. And I personally believe that people who have some level of like internal awareness and like view on their life are more solutions based within themselves, of letting disharmonious thoughts reside coherently within their own mind and heart. And if they can do that internally, then they can definitely do that with other people. And then
Well, I
when
mean,
situations come up, it's easier.
on the shower curtain of wisdom, I have the Robert Thurman quote, Bobby T, where he says, wisdom is tolerance of cognitive dissonance or something. So the more you're able to like kind of get the wisdom thing going, the more you're able to hold these views that don't have to be so extremely polarized in one way or another. And it allows you to kind of take a step back and like from two sets of people in a horrific conflict say, okay, I can understand that both of these parties are coming from a certain place.
Yeah.
Anger, fear,
Mm-hmm.
being the dominant driving emotions of these things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, I also was just going to say, like picking up on what we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago, I don't think you have to watch this stuff. So I don't think you have to feel bad if you're not.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, you don't
Sometimes
have.
people feel this feeling like I have to be aware, otherwise I'm being neglectful of and not compassionate to what other people are going through. Okay, but I think it's okay to have a sense of what's going on, but also not overly indulge in all of the gut-wrenching aspects of this. I don't know if you feel the same way as I do, but I don't think
Oh,
you
yeah, I
have to.
definitely
I
do.
don't know if that serves anyone really in the end, except maybe the people who are getting the clicks and the advertisers who are sponsoring the shows and stuff. I don't know. To watch human beings being
War
brutalized
sells.
over and over again. Yeah.
War
Mhm.
sells. War sells views. War sells weapons. War sells ideology. War sells everything. It really does, because there's a book, and I read it, but I don't remember much about it. But the title of the book was called "War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning." I did a whole long essay on it, probably in my freshman year in college, and the
Uh,
title always stuck with me. And I was thinking about that title the other day, and I was like, why is that bothering me right now? But as we're talking about it, nah, I see it, because
yeah, 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 yeah.
it's the ultimate high stakes game. It's the ultimate in polarity. It's the ultimate in duality, right? The consequences of this are literally deadly.
Well, I was thinking about something like, yeah, I was thinking about something like that because, my even in the episodes we were doing recently, like
Yeah.
we're talking about love and relationships, but we're also talking about what gives meaning,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as a center point, if your meaning is like you're going to try to get enlightened, which I
Mm-hmm.
guess is my idea, whatever that means, right? I'll do my best tumble at it.
Sure.
But uh, I think when you feel that way, your meaning is coming from a different place. And you don't have to get your meaning from some of these things that are much more convoluted, conflicted, polarizing. You don't need those things as
No,
much.
no,
Your meaning is going to come from someplace else. And
no.
maybe part of it is like when there's a meaning vacuum, you get sucked into these things more.
Correct.
Right? I
I
do think
think,
I've seen that in people where there's a kind of an existential hole and they
yeah,
end up getting pulled into these events.
I
Not
think
just
that
aware, not just compassionately aware, but like sucked in.
sucked in.
Yeah.
I think there's a kind of a magnetism in that resides within all of us, that can certain viewpoints can pull at those magnets more than other ones, and if it's strong enough, it will pull you in. It's not that those viewpoints don't exist within you. We have multiple viewpoints existing with us at the same time. It's just that one of them is louder than the other ones, and that's the one that we tend to lean on a little bit more regularly. You know what I'm saying? So like, just for people who are, having their own struggles with, this version of morality or that version of ethical implementation, it is a struggle. That's part of the
What do you mean by
practice.
the ethical implication and morality part of that? Like, just give me a little bit more on that.
So if somebody has a particular leaning towards one side or another and says
In a
that,
conflict like this one. Okay.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah, yeah, and they could say, well, this is the lesser of two evils. This had driven that response. This thing is justification for blank, whatever. What are we talking about? We're talking about murder. Let's just call it what it is. So in what justification can I kill your grandmother?
Yeah.
Is it okay if the government does it? Is that cool? Or no, that's not
I
cool
wonder
because
situation, can I bomb your children and call it fine?
right,
Right. Yeah.
right. No, and I like to use the words kill because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So what ways can we do it? Bombing sounds like maybe something comes from a plane and then a building explodes and then that's it. There's just dust in the air and
I guess
no,
that's like how the language hits you, because bomb doesn't sound good to me.
bomb doesn't
Yeah.
sound good, but when a building implodes, the heat and shrapnel from that projectile will incinerate your flesh, muscle, then bone. And if you're not incinerated, but that shrapnel or whatever is in there hasn't killed you by slicing you apart, you will then be crushed by the weight of what's above you.
So you want to make this as
Graphic as
intensely
possible.
detailed graphic as possible to make it
Just
as
like
real as
when
possible.
somebody shoots somebody or stabs somebody, like the goal is to take your insides and put it on the outside so that you are
Yeah.
no longer in existence. But that's the thing, is we're separate. Again, I talked about separation earlier. We're separate from these acts. We are, oh, we're going to bomb this one. We're going to bomb. Well, what does that mean exactly? Have people seen a bomb go off? I think they'd be quite upset. I know we're gonna wrap in just a few minutes here, but I was at
I
the
got a couple. I got a couple.
yeah, I
Yeah,
was at
you got a couple.
the Air and Water show maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, something like this. And I'm not gonna lie, I smoked a little bit, I take care of my glaucoma,
Uh-huh.
And so we were there, and I'm watching the planes fly overhead, the F-16s and the whatever, Blue Angels, blah 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 blah. And everyone's like, whoa, cool. And, because I have a different view of that because I've seen them up close, whatever. I was
Yeah.
like, I told my friend who was with me, I was like, to many people in the world, that means death.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see that, you hear a sound, and you don't exist in the next moment. That's what that means. So we're
Yeah.
going to sit here and go, woo, because they're on our side and they're fun and they're cool looking. But what is their goal? What is the intention of that machine that was created by humans? To kill from a distance, quickly and cleanly, for those who are doing the killing. That's the intention of that machine. It is not to drive into formation so that you can be entertained on a summer afternoon in downtown Chicago. You know what I'm saying?
I guess
Like,
that's a recruiting exercise.
that is absolutely,
Yeah.
and that's, yeah. So
I think,
you see things and you just have a different perspective.
I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is, again, like, I'm slightly switching gears, but we're
Yeah,
going to wrap up our things maybe
yeah,
in the next
yeah,
10 minutes or something. So we'll get out the things we thought were important to say.
yeah.
Um, it was interesting because it's hard to feel optimistic about this. And
Mm-hmm.
it got me thinking about the doctor I studied with from China. We were talking about him earlier off mic,
Yeah,
and we talked about him with like 9/11. And I was, studying with him at that time, doing my Chinese medical stuff, studying my meditation and Qigong with him. He was my main teacher of that
yeah.
time period in my life. 9/11 happened. I remember coming in and saying, well, don't you think the United States has to do something to respond? Like, isn't that what you have to do geopolitically and so on? And there wasn't like a nanosecond delay. He just said, no. And I said, you don't think something should happen? And he was just like, no, nothing. You should do nothing back. And I was like a little like, I didn't exactly expect that from him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a part of him that was like a martial artist and thing. So I wasn't sure if he'd even come from that space, but he was just like, no. And obviously for him, he was thinking, this is just going to make everything worse.
Yeah.
And is that not true? Has
It's
it not been like a shit couple of decades in the aftermath of this, right? Yeah, absolute truth. So I thought, okay, that's I thought about that again, you know, just the definitiveness of his answer. And then over the course of the day, I was thinking, okay, so that's that part. Very hard to do, obviously. The other part was, is there any reason to feel optimistic at all in these things? Because that's the other part that's very striking. There's this incredible wave of just hopelessness. And I was listening to people talk about this whole thing. And I've been watching, I know, do you know the show Dairy Girls, Daniel?
No,
I hope that would be your thing.
no.
Anyways, it's a story of these like teenage kids, and they're in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. And it's played comedically. It's really funny. And then they'll have these moments of pathos, kind of, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, the IRA and you know, that whole conflict of Northern Ireland is going on as the backdrop to the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I've been watching it. My son and daughter think it's hysterical. So we laugh pretty hard. But, you know, in the backdrop, there's this story going on. And I don't think my son even got that it's what it was. I always had to explain to him at some point, like, you know, this is happening. And he was like, something happened. And he was like, well, this episode's very depressing. And I was like, that's been going on the whole time, dude. And he went, really? So anyways, you know, as a kid, he didn't even fully register him. But anyway, that's a terrible conflict, right? And some of the people I was listening to about this said, well, you know, ultimately, those sides stopped, you know? And the one British commentary I was listening to was basically saying, you know, the Queen shook the hand of the guy who was the head of the IRA or whatever, you know, and one of her family members had been blown up in a bomb, but they had to eventually come together and like
Right.
do this. And I suppose in that context, if you would have been, you know, in the 80s or whatever, or in the 70s, you thought, is this ever going to end? You would have thought, no way. There's no way this is ever going to end. That would have seemed impossible, right?
Yeah.
And then it ended. So I guess that's Buddhist too, in the sense that the bad things end too.
Right.
Dalai Lama talks about that way. We don't always have to talk about the good things ending. Everything is impermanent. Even the bad things can end, you know? And I suppose I don't know how that feels to people about this particular situation, because it does feel so dire, obviously. And I don't want to be Pollyannish about it.
Right.
But I'm sure if you were in Northern Ireland, you thought, no fucking way is this ever going to end. This is going to go on forever.
Right.
And then at some point, something happened where it ended. And eventually people who were victims of violence on both sides had to somehow like lay down their arms and like come back together again. And they did, actually.
Yeah.
You know, in a situation where there's obviously a lot of violence, a lot of death. And I don't know, this different situations, different countries, different cultural settings,
Right.
and so on. I don't want to make an over the top comparison,
Right.
but I was struck by that. I mean, I was struck by the fact that like you would never think that these things would end, and yet sometimes the bad things end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can look at like, take a little sweep back of history and say, oh, those are horrible events, but like sometimes the bad things end too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping the bad things end sooner than later.
I guess the one last thing about this is we did a little bit on exchange meditation at some point. So maybe as a practical closer.
Perfect.
And I thought about it because the Dalai Lama did this with Mao Zedong, you know, and you know, his point was, did it change the mind of Mao Zedong? No. But it changed something in his own mind. So he describes this experience.
And then you're referencing Chairman Mao, right? Leader of
Chairman Mao. Chairman
yeah.
Mao. Yeah.
Leader of China during the
leader of China during when the, you know, China invaded Tibet and the country was destroyed, right? It's gone. And he was like, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna try to do this thing, you know, what he had learned. And he talks about this. And it's a thing that you can do just in general. It's a meditation you can do just in general, but it's also a meditation you can do with maybe particular individuals or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you find yourself on one or the other side of these things, you can try to go through and reach out to these someone who represents the other side, you know? And the idea of the meditation is that you breathe in through the left nostril. You can kind of hold one finger up to close the right. And as you're breathing in, I think if you're doing it through an individual, you kind of imagine that you're breathing in all of the pain and suffering of that individual that you're trying to maybe change your feeling towards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that into kind of the center of your chest, into what would be like your heart chakra, but in this spot in the center of your chest. And you imagine kind of purifying all of this out, all the pain and the suffering of this person. And then you breathe it out again through the right nostril. And then you reverse it, you take it in through the right nostril, breathe it in. And you can kind of imagine this purification of all this stuff that's painful for this other person happening, and you can breathe it back out again. And then you can do through both nostrils, breathe it in into the chest, right into this heart chakra place, go through feeling that whatever, I think they suggest you can breathe it in this kind of like dark, yucky, kind of smoky stuff if you want to, if that visualization works for you. But you can also just breathe it in, kind of have the feeling like I'm taking on the pain of this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, I guess, recognizing that people are acting out of places of pain,
Mm-hmm.
but you can take that in and kind of purify that out and then breathe it back out again. And it's a routine that typically you do like through 3 rounds of that. So it's like a 9-round breathing practice. You sort of know it's working in part when the breathing between the nostrils starts to even out, which it should. And also, hopefully, the heart opens more, right? And in some ways, you develop a more open-hearted feeling towards that person or something, or maybe that group of people. So I don't know how this will be for people. Maybe you feel compassion for both sides. Take the pain of everybody in
Mm-hmm.
and breathe it back out again, right? Or if you feel polarized on one side or the other, maybe try to do it with the people that you see on the opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, see how it feels to you, right? But the Dalai Lama talked about doing it with Chairman Mao, and maybe at first he had the feeling like, well, maybe I'll change his mind.
Mm-hmm.
If I do this, maybe I'll have some mojo that will change his mind. No, didn't change his mind, But even that changing his mind, I think his experience was something like, okay, it started to change my feeling about this, and at least I could come at things from a place of more equanimity.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the thing that will help people. It's a certain kind of practical meditation, right?
I love practical meditations because
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
Capricorn.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the thing to try. I don't know. Maybe people can, if it works for you,
Yeah.
drop
No,
us
that's
drop
good.
us an email and let us know. But to do
Yeah.
one side or the other, maybe both. Yeah. Mhm.
Both sides.
Yeah,
That'd be helpful.
that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But maybe I don't know. It's hard to be optimistic now, but it happened with the IRA, happened in South Africa, right? Eventually apartheid ended. Who
I
would
want to
see
keep
that coming,
I want to keep the hope that anything is possible.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't feeling it today. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't feeling it. But as I started listening, I was like, yeah, the thing with the IRA ended. And you start going through like other things have ended.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
like meditate hard, pray, and hope that that's going to be the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it. All right, brother. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
doing this today. I know
We did the best we could.
we did the best we could, to our audience. Always thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your feedback. If you're watching us on the YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. If you were listening to us on whatever your favorite platform is, feel free to leave us a review on any platform, Apple or YouTube, or, hit us up on email or hit us up via email, jinandtantra@gmail.com. If you're doing the Instagram thing, drop us a like, or send us a message. We will respond. We do respond. We like the feedback. And we don't really do too many of these kind of like current event type things, but like I said to Eric earlier, there was nothing else that I could or would want to talk about today. And so the conversation is difficult because it should be. And that kind of opportunity to be in a vulnerable place, but one that has consequences, are places that I want to go because they're difficult to be in.
My brother was like, no, making the cutting neck. Yeah, he was like, I could hear him over the phone, like just like making that slash over the throat,
Yeah.
like, no. I was like, no, Daniel wants to talk about this because this is coming from like we use the word authenticity here a lot.
Yeah.
From this authentic place, and everything else would have felt fake.
It would have felt fake. I couldn't do. I
Yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah,
do
I
it.
get it.
And I'm grateful to be able to do this in this way, because I feel like through doing this, through having this podcast and, you know, doing this work and thinking about speaking in this way has made me a better thinker and made me a better speaker. And I think ultimately it's made me a better person. So I want to take these opportunities to do something that is tangible in the moment, and that's alive, you know, and that's real. So it's good. So thank you
Yeah,
for doing it with me. And
the same
thank you everybody.
gratitude about that too. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
changing this for the better.
Thanks everybody for listening. You know, if you find what we're doing useful, you know, share it with other people. This is a labor of love for us. So we appreciate the love in return. But you know, for Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Good luck with your practices. Peace.